Okay, hello everybody. Isn't this fantastic? It's been a great day, and I kind of want to thank Dance UK on your behalf, really, for a wonderful day and lots of food for thought. My brain really hurts right now, but thank you. And thank you for asking me to be here today. My name's Elsa. I am coming at this as an educator, as a dance educator. I have a background slightly in dance science as well, but find myself currently working in a number of educational settings, usually in higher education at the moment, but also work on the Dance East CAT scheme as well, so working in a sort of pre-vocational environment. And quite why I just share this with you, I'm going back into a school after Christmas to teach year 9, so you can think of me and wish me luck at that moment. So that's my kind of lens that I'm coming at this from today. And I've been asked to talk to you about positive psychology. So we're kind of going a step maybe a little bit further from what we've talked about this afternoon and going right up the good end and away from the dark side a little bit. And with all of us, there's a lot to say and a very short amount of time to say it in. So if I start talking really fast, I'm sorry. And I'm going to try not to do that today. So here we go. This is it. So here's where I want to go today, really. I want to introduce you to this idea of positive psychology. It's a term that sits within the psychological literature, which is kind of dominating, or not dominating, but emerging into current sort of discussions, I suppose. My particular interest is in flow theory, in Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory, and so I'm going to kind of take you on an adventure into that now, and also in the session later on today. And I want to just briefly summarise a research project that I did quite a while ago, but it acts as a springboard, really, for the context in which further research that I've undertaken in positive psychology in dance has come from. So it seemed like a good place to start as a general introduction for everybody. And then, crucially, I think it's really important to discuss the implications of what we're doing as researchers or educators. What does this mean, and how do we make this real is something that I'm really interested in. How do we take this forward? How does it not stay as just research? So what is the application? And so I'll try not to get too passionate about that at the end. Okay, so here's a quote. From two key authors who are contributing to the positive psychology research. And this is how they define it, as positive features which make a life worth living. That's nice, isn't it? I like that. But also we can conceptualise positive psychology with these ranges of words. So as you start to try to understand what positive psychology is, these words come up time and time again. So there are a lot of individual traits perhaps here that are interesting, that we hopefully as practitioners, those of us that are practitioners, are able to witness on a relatively regular basis. So things like hope, wisdom, a sense of flourishing. I think Joan mentioned that lovely word earlier. It's my current favourite word, so I use it a lot. And they're very individual kind of traits, I suppose. But there are also traits that relate to us as a community, as a group of people, such as tolerance, responsibility, social responsibility, a sense of altruism. So these words kind of sit under where we're going to go today, really. My own research sits in this field, as I said. I'm really interested in this as an educator from the perspective of that moment of exchange with students and participants, actually, not just students, but anyone who's engaging in dance, and how I can create environments, as Eleanor was talking about, that can support people to achieve these very lovely words and lovely characteristics that perhaps help us to have a life that is worth living. So, as I said earlier on, I'm really interested in flow theory, and that's my lens that I'm going to use today. There are many kind of sub-theories within positive psychology, and I'm not going to do them all because we'd be here all day. But I am going to go down the flow route. So You may have heard of this word flow. It's beginning to penetrate our lives a little bit more. It's a term that's coined by this chap here called Cheek Sent Me High. The way to remember that is Cheek Sent Me High, just for future reference. And he is characterising flow as a subjective mental state contributing to optimal experience, which is characterised by complete absorption in an activity at a given moment in time. I'll just let you digest that because there's quite a lot of clauses in there as I read that. So just have a moment to go, whoa. Okay, so certainly, as I said before, I think this idea of flow is penetrating popular culture a little bit. I was reading The Guardian maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and there was this lovely article. You know how they have those little comment sections at the bottom? And the journalist had written, flow is the way to live your life. If you can achieve flow, then you're going to have a great life. I'm not sure about that, but certainly we seem to be talking about it. If we think about what our current context is in terms of recession and all of those perhaps negative sides of our lives right now, then flow might be a way to have that life that's worth living, maybe. Another way to think about flow, have we all seen Billy Elliot? Yeah. So we're in the scene where Billy Elliot has gone to the Royal Ballet School, and he's standing there in front of that huge range of audition people at the front of the panel, and they say, "What do you most love about dance?" And he says this, he says, "I don't know. It sort of feels good, sort of stiff and that, but once I get going, then I forget everything and I sort of disappear. I can feel a change in my body. Sorry, my whole body. Like there's a fire in my body, and I'm just there flying, like a bird, like electricity. Yeah, electricity. And then it launches into Elton John, Electricity song." I think that's that moment. So these are kind of very, I don't mean to be, trite with my comments here, but to kind of give us a sense of where this is and what this is in very real terms. But of course, flow has a psychologically, theoretically, or theoretical basis, and it's important to look at that. And I think that message has come through today really clearly, hasn't it? That we need to base our practice in theory and ground it in that, so that we have an understanding. So, flow is conceptualized or characterized by these 9 dimensions. These 9 dimensions have been proven or explored across a range of quantitative and qualitative research projects, across a range of activities such as leisure activities, high-risk activities, other leisure stuff, workplace, all sorts of activities. And broadly speaking, these 9 dimensions fit into people's idea of what that flow experience is. When we try, as you probably are reflecting, what is that flow experience? Trying to put words to that is tricky. But certainly as we look into kind of interview data from a variety of studies, these are the dimensions that are coming through. So let's just briefly go through them. The one at the top there is a balance between skill and challenge. So on the face of it, that seems fine. Obviously, if our skills are too great and the challenge is too weak, we're probably going to get a little bit bored. If it's the other way around, so if our skills are too low and the challenge is too great, then we're probably going to get a little bit scared. So the attainment of flow in either one of those situations is less likely. Does that make sense? If we can get the balance between skill and challenge right, then it might be said that flow is more likely to be achieved in that situation. The next one is the merging of action and awareness. So I don't know, those of you that have danced, I'm guessing everyone's danced to some degree or another, but that moment where you're dancing and you can't quite tell where your action, the physical action of dancing physically, like my arm dance right now, and my awareness of that, where those two things end or begin. So a current thing that I'm working on, and I'll talk about it in the session later on, is looking at flow within contact improvisation to help students in higher education to take risks in their learning of contact improvisation. And I don't know, again, if you've ever been in a contact duet and you're dancing with somebody and this third thing begins to appear. There's your body, there's their body, and then the dance appears itself, and it begins to have its own identity. And certainly when I've been talking to dancers about that, this action and awareness merging is really typified by that experience. We've talked a lot about goals today, but here they are again in flow. In order to be, or to achieve flow, or to be in a flow state, we need to have clear goals. We need to know where we're going. We also need to have a sense of unambiguous feedback, and that can be coming from two directions, if you like. So we can have our own internal feedback about where our body is in space and time, and respond to that. But then we can also have the external feedback that we might be getting from an audience, as I am right now. I'm kind of looking at you, making sure that you're with me and you're coming on my journey into flow, and trying to respond to that. And teachers as well, of course, providing feedback when you're in a learning situation. As long as that feedback is unambiguous, then flow is more likely to occur. Of course, if it's ambiguous, we might say that flow might not occur. In a flow state, usually there's a sense of concentration. So we're able to concentrate solely on that task at that particular moment in time. We're not distracted by what we're going to have for tea, or what's that person doing over there with their nose, or whatever. We're able to concentrate on the task in hand. The next one is a sense of control, and the control that we have over the activity that we're doing. So we need to know that we are able, in a way it's connected to the first one, we need to know that we are able to achieve what we're going to be asked to do. And we need to have a sense of control over that psychologically. This is an interesting one, and I think there's lots of debate, a potential debate. The next one, loss of self-consciousness within a dance context. As a performing art, do we ever lose that sense of self-consciousness? I don't know. But in a flow state, Csikszentmihalyi suggests that actually, yes, we do. We lose our sense of being watched or judged when we are in a flow state. The transformation of time, when we talk anecdotally to dancers, they like this one. They really relate to this one, and it might be because dance is a temporal thing. But the transformation of time is referring to the speeding up of time or the slowing down of time, or indeed the kind of stasis of time. We don't really notice time anymore. And that's a really typical descriptor of a flow experience. And in my experience of talking to dancers, that's the one they always go for first. So they like to talk about that kind of standing still of time. The final one is always the one where people start to furrow their brows and go, autotelic experience, what's that? It's a sexy term, I suppose, for the intrinsic enjoyment we get from the task that we're doing. So it's essentially about doing the task for its own sake and not doing it for any other reason. And that final one, the autotelic experience dimension, is the one that's most often cited in research. Susan Jackson is a really key flow researcher in physical activity and sport, particularly figure skating, and she calls it the most salient dimension. And two other researchers, Martin and Cutler, worked with some theatre actors, and they found that the task was more enjoyable when people were in flow. So there are some kind of relationships there with tasks and enjoyment, the intrinsic enjoyment that we get from doing stuff. So in dance, what does that mean? Actually, in terms of flow research, there's not a lot of dance and flow research happening that I'm aware of. There's one published paper, which is this one. You can see the citation at the bottom there, and that was out in 2006. What's interesting about the comments that I've pulled out here, this is a qualitative study within a sort of phenomenological framework, and as you read through those quotes, you'll begin to notice the kind of take-home message of enjoyment. So you've got enjoyment there, okay, through this paper. There aren't any other dance published papers, as I said, but hopefully there will be soon, because I've got some being written up as we speak. Okay, so I undertook a project back in 2008, so we are going back in time a little bit, but it's an interesting place to start. And I was looking at the flow experiences of recreational, vocational and professional dancers, and I wanted to look at the differences between those experiences. I chose a mixed method approach, so I did some quantitative stuff and I did some qualitative stuff to help me understand the frequency of flow experiences, to understand the nature of those experiences, and critically for me, understand the antecedents of the flow experience. So what might facilitate or not facilitate a flow experience for these different groups. There were lots of findings that I could report in here, but I'm going to zone in on one because for me it kind of prefaces the research journey that I've been on. And that is around this autotelic experience dimension. All the dancers in this study were confirmed that autotelic experience was the key to their flow experience, so we're echoing previous research there. This is a comment from a recreational dancer. I fundamentally love it. I feel enjoyment most often, most of the time, which is so nurturing. It feels like I can come back into my body and enjoy that process. But if we compare that to a comment from a vocational dancer, we see a slightly different story, and that probably echoes some of the research that we've heard today. It was a very stressful time for me. This is a dancer in training. The need to succeed, pass, do well, all that stuff affected my enjoyment at that time. I was having more fun away from university. So if we go back to one of the first slides that I was talking about the kind of characteristics of positive psychology and wisdom and hope and all of those lovely positive words, we're not seeing very much of that in that vocational dancer's description. And there are lots of ways that we could interpret that. We might suggest that actually for a vocational dancer compared to a recreational dancer, there is an intensification of training, of course. We may do more hours and the training gets harder. Buckroyd, we've heard about her already today, Julia Buckroyd suggests that student dancers are more predisposed to burnout and injury, so that might be part of the story within this comment. Cheek Sent Me High himself talks about the institutionalization of learning and that externalizes the process of learning, of course. And so if we externalize a process, then can flow be achieved? Probably less likely, I would say. So for me, as someone who's working in this context, I want to know what I can do to help people achieve the good, the positive, as opposed to perpetuate perhaps a more negative context. And finding myself as I do in an HE context at the moment, then that for me is particularly important. So I'm going to just whip through this. This is trying to understand what the dancers in that study perceived as the antecedents to their flow experiences. So here we're talking about what might facilitate the flow experience. And they talked about a range of personal effects and a range of situational effects. So personal effects, similar perhaps to what Charlotte was talking about, there's a lot of mental and physical preparation that goes into dance performance, as we know. But if we know about that, and if we know what we're doing, and if we feel, crucially, we feel mentally and physically prepared, then a flow state is more likely to occur. We're more likely to feel confident in ourselves, of course. From a situational perspective, so the environment that we might be looking at, there were lots of environmental factors that seem to impact on a flow experience. So open spaces, not black boxes. I'm looking around me kind of going, this is a big black box. But open spaces where we can see the outside space, spaces that aren't hindered by pillars. That was important. Not marley floor, wooden floors, they liked that. Baggy clothes, not tight clothes, all help the dancers to move towards that flow experiencing that perhaps they were trying to seek out, if you like. Positive interaction with others, really important. And again, we've heard about that kind of social interaction being important today. And crucially, feeling unjudged. And here are just a few quotes, both from recreational and professional dancers, about feeling unjudged, about trust. And if you look at that professional dancer there, that last word in her quote really capitalizes on play. Play as a really key factor in attaining a flow experience. And we could talk a lot about that. We could unpick that, but I'm not going to today. But we might do later on. But the word that I've just chucked up there is fun. So again, if we kind of take a step out from this particular study and look at other qualitative studies, Stinson and Bond are particularly interesting researchers. I find they work within a dance education context. They're looking at experiences of children in dancing and the fun that they have. There's a paper that's about the superordinary, how dancers perceive, or children, sorry, child dancers perceive the superordinary in dance. And so there are lots of lovely anecdotal comments in there which are really, really interesting and chime with this notion of having fun when we're trying to attain flow and when we're dancing. So I'm going to whiz through this, and I will pick up on it more in the next session. But there are frameworks perhaps that we can use to help perpetuate a flow state. One of those might be flow itself. So we can, you'll notice that I've taken out some of the dimensions there, because for me, and in my practice, I'm finding that I'm drawing on these 6 dimensions quite a lot to help students attain a flow state in their learning context. So trying to make sure that I provide a balance between skills and challenge, trying to ensure that I provide clear goals, or that the dancers themselves have an idea of what their goals are, making sure I'm providing unambiguous feedback, as I'm sure we're all trying to do that all the time, trying to ensure that there's a context for concentration to occur, that I'm handing over the locus of control to students. Again, we've heard about that, allowing dancers and students to have a say in what's happening in the studio, and ultimately trying to have a nice time. So trying to perpetuate the intrinsic enjoyment of dancing and remembering that. If we think back to the findings of the study, recreational dancers seem to have it sorted, but something happens at a vocational level and it all goes a little bit pear-shaped. So what can we do to help those vocational dancers sustain their intrinsic enjoyment of dancing at that level? I'm going to talk about this little acronym in the session, but also this is something that in the practice sort of parts of my research that I've been playing with. It's the TARGET acronym. Some of the educators amongst us might be familiar with this. And again, perhaps, hopefully chimes with some of the kind of ideas that I've been trying to get across in this talk. So just to kind of conclude then, why is positive psychology important, and for me, why is flow perhaps a key to helping us a little bit more? Certainly research, and a wide range of research, is suggesting that positive psychology interventions can promote greater optimism, hope, perseverance. If we adopt that stance from the get-go, then hopefully our dancers and our students will be more positive and have that optimism that we're looking for. There are studies that suggest that positive psychology environments can decrease levels of depression, can support the voluntary behaviour that all of us are wanting to see amongst student bodies in particular, but also professional dancers, help people value a realistic perceptions of themselves in the world, crucially, and perhaps one for Mr. Gove, increase productivity and self-direction by engendering intrinsically motivated and autonomous behaviour. So that was a whistle stop. I'm really sorry. There's some further reading there for you. But thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and see you later. Thank you.